it is like it's like it's very interesting right now. It's for like getting into that was like there's revenge on like Lucas for like keeping like this like fire clock. It's definitely not very much so I'm looking that as like how exactly I'm looking for any to look into that to be to like the plan to like only destroy that Lucas is like especially like that's is almost like the scenario that I'm just like while that that's what Lucas but for to do the beginning and to be just like beginning to like the Pacific at that point itself also at that point, it's different like the scenario to be that most likely it has to be like most detection sprinklers or like the scenic area of that basketball arena. Like the basketball match arena playing the scenario that I'm looking so like the name so looking exactly for like Eddie to that instead of that what like Eddie adding something else in adding platform to that sprinklers and basically that way I'm totally bring that the match the basketball match like in between while we focusing to the connection like the match probably getting interrupted with like the sprinklers like becoming active and basically then the basketball arena that where the that liquid is like the scenario that was wrong at that point I'm still looking for like the basketball match getting so strong to select to another state it's like the scenarios that I was saying, like that the team leader, basketball team leader of like Lucas team, in which like of like the team in which like Lucas and like that team leader getting extremely enraged with like Lucas because like comes to the particular like the team leader without much credibility like at that one finding out that basically it was like getting revenge for like Lucas for like Lucas skipping like it is like Kayak Club. It's like a scenario that I'm doing. And the moment like the basketball team would be finding out about this like thing straight away firing like Lucas from like the basketball team and basically like taking a sub instead of like and replacing Lucas with like a sub for like the basketball match or like the ball from day with like the scenario that I'm doing. And Lucas being extremely enraged and disappointed and like Lucas would be extremely enraged for taking out all that anger on precisely might the last like custom. But like we still won't be at all coming anywhere near getting because like definitely the Lucas would be only afraid of that would be only thoroughly lacking that the courage to like confront it like the scenario that I'm on the current on the current. That way according to my friends and so differing like that for like Lucas most likely afraid of that Eddie and yet like you Lucas most likely protesting by not showing up deciding like never show up to like the fire flood of like Eddie anymore. It's like the scenario that I was bringing. Yeah, like Lucas would be attempting to like ensure to that not run into like Eddie because like Lucas and definitely might be having that fear towards like Eddie. And also might be that behave like the scenario that I was bringing. And definitely that way like I'm bring that in like the next part club like after like the basketball match to be destroyed by Eddie like the very next club that to definitely bring Lucas to like the very to ensure that like Lucas is present in like the very next club would be what like Eddie from the bring would to give as that order to that Mike Anderson. But like I'm bringing even though Mike Anderson would doing that absolute everything to get like Lucas to like come along with that to get the next club that and definitely bring Lucas definitely refusing in that Lucas like rebellion Lucas definitely refusing to the show at that kind of stuff. Like it's like the scenario that happened to and that totally enraging like Eddie even more and definitely other different like Eddie at that point from that point on like this really targeting Lucas and coming up for like Lucas and like definitely scaring like fighting Lucas and scaring Lucas and that way forcing Lucas to like definitely come to like the next part like it's like the scenario that happens so like Lucas only getting afraid and that and Lucas like that way through that fear like Lucas like showing up to the next paragraph but with that Lucas a reluctant feeling and definitely able to bring like all this frustration like Lucas like taking it out on all on like what the fitness that might cover is like the scenario that I'm delivering and while on the side like Lucas still delivering would be that going after like the leader of the basketball club leading for like the leader of the basketball club to like totally change his position and like to like to replace like the sub with like once again with like Lucas will be along the lines like Lucas will be pleading to like the leader of like the basketball team and definitely on the track eventually like Lucas will be pleading to that leader of the basketball team and not like eventually can maybe agree, but on one condition, and which will be definitely, I'm still remember that like leader of like that voting will be most likely might have been extremely jealous of that Philly back when like Philly was like definitely was rebels. So like so did to that my team think like Billy's sister like so like I think that most likely the leader of like the basketball team might have a crush and like to this definitely was rebels. So like the leader of like the basketball team like telling the expanded that team will take Lucas back to the basketball team only on the condition that like Lucas gets played with like that team for like the basketball with the along the lines but the basketball you know we can Lucas at the condition and the claim Lucas at that point like Lucas getting desperate to like the point that like Lucas even going up to like Maxine and basically like telling asking telling Maxine to like please go on this like date with like the basketball so that like Lucas could like re-enter back to his like tape maybe along the desperate extent like and because that Lucas is eventually ending up with it. And that Liam invite Lucas would be asking this to like Maxine and because like Maxine getting extremely enraged and like most like the Maxine insulting with us and like you know just like that. Stephanie was famous. And at that until that point, I'm looking like in the Maxine has a person like broken up with like Lucas like still Maxine might be still holding on to that pain post that like Lucas might eventually change and like might be able to like understand Maxine, but like I'm looking at what I'm trying to once like Lucas obviously the most leading to like I could go on a date with like it's like that's about later like at that point I'm looking like Maxine would be so, being so confident with like Lucas and completely moving on from like Lucas and telling Lucas to like never speak to like Maxine, never even show up or like speak to like Maxine have that day with like during the case of scenarios that I was about to be on the friend right now. So certainly my considering merchant right now, especially for like after like Martin and Robin Black, the very next newest member to like the gang of like Mike and Crow. The next time like the monsters of like the Pharaoh world would be making them would be definitely edit. It's definitely my considering. And definitely at that point like my considering looking for like most likely for like it is like first impression itself of like on finding out about like the Pharaoh world and like monsters of like the Pharaoh world. At that point I'm looking at anything just to make crazy that lad of like a character that you that like Eddie instead of that fear like I'm just like Eddie's like first impression to do that of like an absolute excitement and matter towards like on while Eddie would be seeing like some more stuff of like the parallel world and would be finding out about like the parallel world through Mike and Chris. It's like there is a scenario that I'm pick up scenario that I'm looking for the brain vision. And definitely my good brain is for like in like producer like unlike in like the news case in like the news like final situation where like the lead ended up becoming into like ending up in like a sacrifice kind of like a situation like definitely in Eddie's case things to be totally different and like the player Eddie like the having a lot of work also against like the monsters of the was still Eddie so different to definitely supply same like the very end of that show. Stranger Things is like the scenario that I was different and the right now. Okay, so that but I'm still in the different in that like Hopper definitely might be alive and definitely Hopper account and might be definitely in like an important kind of landscape and like the version kind of laboratory base in Russia might be like the case definitely not sure but definitely that reports might have that position propagated Hopper a lot and that might have also so that turns sort of into that drowsy like state exactly like how they did took in that capacity to Robin as well as Steve when they had captured Robin and Steve. And even then like Hopper might have not revealed anything about like 11 o'clock. Might have been like the playing of the and the play on the it might have been only recently that like while going through rechecking over and over again of Black Hopper's like what and like they might have found out this like Chelsea secret tiny pocket within like hidden pocket within that of the water, where like a tiny photo of black hopper along with that 11 might have been present. Certainly, might see that the only reason is that the electric civil strangers might have found out about that 11 still alive. Certainly, and especially since that due to their recent setback with like energy energy laboratory uh, plan of like the machine and opening of the gate. It is like the modern pocket like with that plan of the principles that ending up backfiring like and preparing at present like like the principles of like most likely would be only saying that they need forcefully that totally trying to like bring uh 11 to that transport 11 to that structure would be totally step won't be possible if they attempt. So like if they attempt that like the plan to do once again that car will get organized like the rest of it might be having that to I think the station. So definitely instead of that like to stop them to like bring elements to like Russia with that as with them like an exchange might be what like the people might be planning and like that might be the reason for like at present like the joke like getting to the like bomb look like the stamp from the Russia containing like this doll, which might lead definitely to like Rocket 11 and definitely like I'm definitely putting those receiving more packages and like I'm putting that in like the series of packages like the most likely be episodes containing like the interrogation audio of like Hopper. And that way only at that point like just shocking finding out just and more moments shocking finding out about like Hopper being alive. And definitely I'm just going to be also in that case there could be also like the voice recording of like one of the working positive and that talking about this like exchange school and how then being aware that like about like doing alive and person being with like Joyce and basically like them and that never doing like that's supposed to like even to the person might be totally unaware of like basically 11 having lots of power it's definitely meant for him. So definitely that them like telling Joyce that about like the exchange where like Joyce had to where like yeah so if like Joyce won't offer back and I that like Joyce has to like exchange 11 to let the rest of the that would be along the lines of the different that that in that audio in like the episode like which something that eventually was getting like the message will be like to the scenario that so like at that point I'm different that definitely simultaneously Joyce as well as like Nora Boban you be also having like that simultaneous two shots of like one of like that have shot of absolute joy of like the realization of like Hopper having made it and having survived but also like the talk of like with the situation with like and the danger in which like is like the scenario that I'm looking over and I'm trying to understand. Definitely I'm referring like that is that Moray Bowman as well as like Joyce Lato planning, strategizing out and creating their ultimate plan and like only them setting that term message as like they are in in a they getting like I think that they are only agreement for like exchange and definitely I'm going to bring like during that exchange like when that exchange would be happening like I'm doing like according to that Moray Bowman as well as Joyce plan in which like definitely they I'm talking about using like the help of like Owens and his like team as well. Owens and his like post as well through the collective effort like during like the exchange that image that the exchange the different to take place in like Hawkins and like production of stepping once again showing up to like Hawkins for like exchange that's like while bringing Hopper with them and then the different like during the exchange like during like an ambush attack by Owens and his team according to like the collective plans of like Owens and like Joyce as well as more relevant and that way like when like the Russian forces like who would be present at like the location of the exchange like getting off road and that way that that with the collective effort like them say this pop up is that typical scenario that I'm looking for like typical scenario that I'm doing is for like by sheer coincidence like it's being exactly during the point of that the exchange lab while they will be like using such an ambush strategy still that strategy is failing and like while they were supposedly about to take away 11 at that point by sheer coincidence like I'm looking at that point that 11 gaining back like power like stuff was possible then other better and with that like element will be about to be taken away to like but yeah that then the second game on gaining back the power like taking out like the Russian boss and basically that way that hop up as well as like element as well as Jones as well as Rebel might all like the fully that way getting reunited and those Russian forces like talking that way getting taken out yet like I'm looking like from that point on like hop up like enforcing even more strict security for like for 11 due to that that situation at that point which would be definitely that that Russian folks that was aware of that 11 having survived and everything. Is that the scenario that I'm looking on the bring able to it was so like the play on the mission right now is definitely for like either within that or that goes for sort of saying that there being like a secret cassette that within that door and with me that there being that some switch that somewhere within that somewhere on the outside of like that door secret switch on that door which that goes when you'll be pressing that secret switch that the door opening up and basically revealing the cassette. It's like one possibility that I'm looking or like a the possibility that it's for an install and in like the current first door like that we absolutely nothing. I know cassette within it but like I'm preferring that to see another drawing, maybe that a few days later, like so it's a few another parcel look like another drawing, and that second dot most likely having like the button and like I said, same is like the other book to that another thing. Okay, so that definitely like the ambition right now is definitely for like by the time it would be like time for like the fire club like meeting like I'm definitely preferring that even with all their effort like I'm preferring neither might know person being able to like find any new members for like the match like the scenario that I'm and at that point like Eddie on realizing this totally being extremely curious but like this point that I'm extremely curious but like might have to have like captain and definitely I'm totally playing like Eddie at that point like totally and I'm looking at that point like that kind of like at that point some looking into the like the basketball match in which like Lucas like competing would be exactly during that time. It's definitely my duty. So like definitely the announcement for like the basketball match like would be at that point happening and like definitely Eddie would be at that point while being like curious like stay like he would be hearing like the sound of the announcement of like a basketball match like championship match like about to do at like for the pro and everything. So definitely, I'm totally bring at that point since like I'm hearing that announcement, adding that the enrage setting that regarding to that destroy that neighbors that project that purpose and the good match is that the scenario that I'm so that's definitely considering an answer like the complex experiment in like the Russian technology laboratory in Black Russia that experiment that I'm preferring that definitely that experiment might have ended up becoming a success and like gate might have been opened at least at that point in that that is that face that humanoid monster might have entered like straight away that has like today might have been open to us the next time using it to straight away that one of like the page humanoid monster might have infiltrated into like surface energy level brain but and like definitely might have caused a lot of damages and might have quickly taken off a lot of that the Russian forces and like sent at that occasion might have been like so like quickly delivering that quickly that the conversation might have been turned off by the Russian scientists and that they might have quickly closed and that way that this monsters might that single phase monster might have ended up being put into like a contained that kind of closed like state enclosed like state it's definitely not threat. That way that single phase humanoid monster might have ended up being put into like an impressive kind of state in that Russian level frame but it might have been like the definitely not threat and all this might have happened before like my countries were like fighting off against like the mini mind flap might have been like the case definitely not friend. So definitely I'm referring that it might have been after like the day that might have been opened in like the Russian energy laboratory in like Russia might have been closed it might be after that like I'm referring like the gate in beneath like the mall in Hokkien in that secret version of the level beneath like the mall in Hokkien like might have been closed and like the mini mind blast might have been defeated the new one thing. So definitely once like the mini mind once that gate in that secret version the level beneath like the mall in Hokkien so like what might have happened might have been that the mini mind blast without a spray delay that mini mind blast without a spray delay might have turned into top like material of the mini mind flare might have been bacteria and definitely I'm afraid that the core like the mini mind flare getting taken out like the mini mind flare having like attack like really and really getting like that by getting taken out getting that multiple bypass so like that most of element within Billy as well might have turned into like some of the like case might have been close like the monster element within Billy as well might have turned into like that stuff like things that we went through in between. But while in the case of Lac 11 alone, like I'm sure what might have happened might have been that Lac since like the last time I think Lac 11 used up Pelican, it was able to like use up Pelicans. So you can see when Lac 11 was like forcefully taking away, bringing away like the monster element contained within like the white mark, like it was like so like the moment 11 might have removed that monster element, like some a bit more of that monster element might have some few extent of like that monster element might have seeped into within deep within that 11 and definitely might have gotten hold of and access to like the powers of like element of like the powers of like telepathy as well as telekinesis as well as like the access to like the language. These three powers of like 11 like I'm going like with like a tiny bit of like the monster element might have got access to might have been what might have happened to the name of the and that way that this like a tiny bit of like a monster element with 11 might have used that the access to that task like through which like even locate can locate anyone like a different like by that this tiny bit of monster element might have totally taken full control over like the telekinesis as well as like the telepathic powers of like as well as like that to like the Dark. So like by obtaining control over like that to like the Dark World, like just like tiny extent of like the element of like the midnight blur, like even after like the gate getting close, there is like the small in that pocket as well as the gate getting close, and like the Russian energy laboratory in Russia might have been what had happened to the terrain. So that even at that point, like while the being able to no gates at all in like kind of next state, still like the monster and then the element might have been able to like survive solely due to like element having like the dark to access like the dark void. Definitely when the terrain and the play in like the dark void area, it might have been that it might not just be dark, but like it might be also like the perfect fold like setting as well for like the monster element of that the minimite as well as like the favorite monsters to be able to like survive. Definitely when the so like by having that access to that dimension of like the dark void like the few bit of that element of like the minimite might have survived within 11 and might be even uh, that way alive within like 11 even though the couples of 11 and might be like slowly spreading within 11 might be like that together with the 11 friend and as for like the um, and then I'm totally referring that it might have been recently that like once again like the at like the energy laboratory in Russia like the gate might have been the gate they are using like the complex machine might have that complex machine in like the Russian the laboratory in Russia might have been once again restarted and like the gate the Russian folks might have spent prepared themselves and might just like their intent just might have been to like this time with their cooperation to like capture like more faces humanoid monster and like trap more faces humanoid monster and that will like slowly to create like an entire army of like this humanoid monster and to make them through the sign like to make them take the orders of that structure for them. In that way create a like an army of like weapons might be what like person might be planning with the flavor of the range. And they might also need 11 cells as well. If like things go out of hand with like or with like that while they will expanding like the army of like this similar monster things go out of hand for them. Then for them to like be able to control like situation like they might definitely need 11 might be like the reason for like most likely right now the have certain person like most likely having that absolute need for like 11 at present most likely even after like them having like the having revealed to be having possessing like the famous humanoid monster at like the position. Certainly no explanation. And that according to the mentions of the government might have been only while recently that the Russian forces that might have using the information again might have reopened like the closed gate in like the Russian laboratory in Russia. Like at that point might have been when like the dust particles uh, of like the monster element within like that was present within like Billy during like the point of like while Billy had been taken out by like the minimind club as well as like the topical of like the monster element of like the minimind club to which like the minimind club after like the gate closing in like then we have a Billy's like the more like might have turned down to like all this like the particles of like the minimind club or might have stayed alive. Yet like I was from that the like the density of like the quantity of like the dust particles of like the minimal flap might have not came alive solely due to like the gate, the open gate being all the way at like right here, like I'm like only a certain extent, tiny extent of like the dust particle of like the minimal flap might have been even able to like come alive solely due to that extreme distance between like the gate and like the gate, that the location of like where like the dust particle might be like the case definitely going to. So like after this dust particle might have only recently came alive like last it might have maybe infected maybe not very few humans or like it might have been such few quantity of like the particles that it might have only been able to like infect only a single human and that human won't like be Chrissy might be like the cases like the other Pacific that I'm about the prevention of brain. So like since the document brain mission that I'm delivering like the monster element within that element which might be allied to that the person like which might have only taken advantage of that elements like the power like element to that access like the dark void to be able to like survive even in like the sunlight and everything while within 11 like so through that access to like the dark void it might have also might have been maintaining consistent communication to stay with like the original giant mind flap by even like taking control of like element like very perfect power that it might be also reading like the minds of like element as well as like when some of element falls like might and not skill at might even or like the phone or anything like basically everything that happening in that events like that and all the updates in that events like each and every single day. And the need like the monster element within like element so it's like access to like the last word might just be like constantly updating with like the channel or the mind plus like the password through the last word might be that also that the case and might all this might be happening in the different discussion what might be happening is like a public data and experiment. So that according to my information, even like the control even what might be like the control of like the monster element of like exactly like the minimum block which might be happening to electricity as well might be or happening according to like plans like formulated by and progression through as per like the plans of like the original mind block which like the which through like the communication between like the element lab and like the moisture element most likely within like 11 communicating through like 11 through the access to the dark words and within 11 they might be constantly communicating and might be according to the plan discussed steadily being discussed between that said book that's the potential and mind lab and like the moisture element within 11 that like right now at present like the control or Chrissy uh, and everything would be by the element of the sentiment. This might be the case, might be all happening. So definitely might put the image. So that's definitely my brain right now is definitely for like spending time with like editing untold brain what sequence going on like feeling as like way more of like a relief rather than when compared to like spending time with like a boyfriend that is not near definitely brain like so would be so full of like expectations and like getting performance might be the case of brain will get like the pain might still like even while something might still like the rest was later like on the that listens like out of that situation and like the hallucination and everything happening to like proceed to like the most likely the element of the minimum within the first like and so like to say totally wanting to like kind of more with like which more reflected like definitely I'm spring like after the current like meeting let's say that to see and a day like I'm like to see casually like was you telling to her person about like how it is like so funny and everything. Like being scenario that you end up never seeing her boyfriend getting enraged like see and then like wanting her to like never meet or even talk to like Eddie ever again. Supplement friends and like to see even though they will be agreeing to that like I'm putting like to see in like the coming days like they having more of like this like disturbing situation with like the hallucination of like the movement and everything. So definitely I'm different that eventually proceed once again running into that Eddie once again is like the scenario that I'm doing and at that point I'm just possibly most likely uh, a Tuesday and I'm bring like Eddie most likely like telling I'm don't bring Eddie at that point like telling person to see to like definitely to come to that Eddie's like band uh, show that the hideout on like the big and everything. So definitely I'm going to see at that point really feeling that up to fully like Eddie's present time definitely I'm going to be agreeing and definitely see would be that way in a Gundam and like people are enjoying like the like Eddie and group would be playing the band music and everything. So like while Eddie would be taking Topsy back to like school and then would bring like most likely Topsy most likely different school to go to that the band play of like Eddie like was not like as like Eddie and like Topsy would be returning back to like school at that point I was bring like most likely for like Topsy's like boyfriend like the really like only seeing the sign that the was going like a fight to take place between like the passenger near like and the chopping at like Eddie and fighting Eddie like the scenario that I'm delivering and them during that fight ending up with like Eddie or sorry like the basketball layer and defeating like the basketball layer of like the scenario that I'm so definitely and a totally different like scenario to be like to option definitely be like the basketball layer like in an unprovoked manner side of the attacking like Eddie and definitely that being how it's supposed to get and definitely I'm looking like initially Eddie deciding not to like fight back against like the basketball like only due to like the team. Yeah, like I'm like the basketball hero like topic with like attack on Eddie and definitely literally Eddie deciding to fight back and at that point like the basketball hero like started getting decision. So it's like and getting some back in front of the blender. So it's like the scenario that I'm moving. So like definitely at that point like you see like taking that basketball hero away and the player was running like while looking into the spring, trying to like comfort like the basketball later. Like at that point, I'm sort of like the basketball will make Indian treasure like the game will be shouting at the end. I'm just running supposed to be at that point, that one again, that's just like monster at the certain extent of like that monster element coming out and basically also taking control of like Eddie as well at that point. It's like one person scenario that so like until that point while completely comforting Eddie that trying to like comfort Eddie that the first software is like like Eddie getting extremely enraged and she and like shouting at him. And all of them like this like character and personality so changing and like to see like with voice as well changing and making the serious to see like with me taking control like the monster element coming out of like again like taking control like Eddie like one person scenario that I'm thinking of like at that point like another extent of like the monster element like maybe like due to like second at present like which most likely at like the original level of there might be maybe getting even bigger through like the combat movie. It's like the opposite element, sort of like a bit more of like monster element coming that's like in like the dark dust kind of state coming alive and basically that monster element like coming for coming for like the basketball layer and like taking another of the basketball layer like looking at that and like so certainly at that point I'm also bringing up late without inspiration like that. I'm probably bring maybe on that very evening like or like the very next day I'm probably bring that uh, ready to I mean like the basketball layer totally under like the control of like the element of like in mind player like looking for Eddie and finding Eddie and I'm also bring that a second fight happening between like the basketball layer and Eddie while like the basketball layer only having like the added power of like the minimized player between like the basketball layer and that fight like I was going like Eddie that quickly getting awkward and defeated and I was going that happening in front of like Mike and Dustin like the snap that I'm so like definitely I was going like Mike and Dustin would be definitely be able to like sense that unusual vibe out of like the basketball river and definitely understand that and Mike and Dustin would be getting that feeling and vibe as that really being similar to like how Billy was when Billy was under like the control of like the minimized lab. So definitely I'm something like Mike as well as Dustin feeling that whole situation and definitely I'm like Mike and Dustin like saving Eddie and they Eddie away. And to bring up that point for like Eddie being in such absolute shock of like basically the sudden defeat against like the leader of like, the basketball team. And definitely from that point on, maybe like Mike as well as like Dustin who been starting to like still spy on like the basketball team. Was that suspicion and basically while they were spying like on the spring like maybe like that's why she concept like running into Eddie and definitely able to bring like Mike as well as Dustin saying some sort of like an excuse to take off Eddie yet like I'm just Eddie won't do that really practice if my kind of thing and Eddie deciding to like step follow my kind of set and basically that way by my kind Dustin would be like fine on like the basketball lyrics like and just collect them totally most likely because like something that would be being done that absolute concrete evidence that like the basketball lyrics control like the control of once again like the minimum player on the move and like taking control of the team usually and like that, like the last one later, like the control of the thing will be around the line, but like that realization I'm at that point that Mike as well as Dustin would be getting and like at that point Silva with some like 80 as well. Totally while following Mike and Dustin like happening to that scene like the scenario balance and just seeing how like I'm like eventually getting dragged into like the whole adventure of like Mike and so against like the against like the mind flap and like the basic monster and the village that thing scenario that I'm with the right now and today. It's like the name still in the friend for like this week once that might will be like going up to like 11 at like California and like the name of the like my definitely Nancy knows like my Nancy and the for like the as well as like Maxine definitely showing up along with them. But like there was some definitely won't be like showing up at all. It's like the scenario that I was about for example, like them preparing for like if like the basketball match of like Lucas take place. Uh, then was like Lucas being extremely exhausted and like Lucas not waking up like the next morning. And that day being too tired. Yet like I'm telling you that for Lucas still don't feel exhausted with his wanting to like go but like I was for definitely I was at that point like while Mike and also Neil being going up to like there was so like take Lucas to come like different was like they were happening between like my thing and Lucas. So they are selling like Lucas in a rebellious manner like that to solidify that parallel of with like nothing like Lucas was there to like no come with up like the most likely scenario the scenario that I'm personally totally perfectly definitely. So three understand definitely not only brings that way that definitely I'm still remembering and for like one like Mike and also would be showing up definitely to meet 11 like I'm it might be like on exactly why you see at like school it's like good now that I'm doing and like and for like the next day as well like totally bring for like right now with like the teacher taking Angela away like I'm like Angela would be getting angry taking out that anger and purchasing once again on like 11 the next day as well. And the player was throwing like the next day as well, like Angela and from like the play mocking and making fun of like 11 and insulting 11 in front of like those in front of like the scenarios that I'm different and about to bring it to be exactly why that will be happening and I'm going to bring exactly still in the moment exactly why that will be happening like will I'm going to bring to not be offended that location like will so that may not be unaware about like will being unaware about all this happening and like so different will to be most likely it's the one who will be like first seeing and like Mike and the others that they will be showing up to like Edwin and will study scenario better. So definitely I'm preferring that way. Eventually Maxine will be totally desperate to like seek 11 and basically I'm preferring that way for to be Maxine that will be first seeing that 11 getting made fun of by that exact scenario that I'm saying. And definitely I'm preferring Maxine single-handedly teaching Angela as well as her friend that lesson and basically putting that in their place is like giving them scenario that and being there for like that with now that I'm the super different and also actually the mention that like after like within 11 the process like offering that I'm offering that my friend as well as like my support leading from like California definitely would be CC of the intent of like wanting to have like 11 with like 11 school at like California and basically to come back to like Hawkins and like join at like Hawkins school and with like my campus and for like 11 to like it was like this had like my symptom the player was like Maxine as well as Mike will be desperately repeatedly telling 11 to that take the service but like 11 won't be agreeing to that because like I'm the different definitely for like 11 I'm the like for 11 11 the only thing is that basically the current situation of 11 was not something that 11 should be running away from rather than that for 11 to like face and overcome but the 11 that 11 will be taking 11 don't find distance like scenarios and so like that way like two ways like definitely my team of might won't be agree in agreement at all and that way like war between like 11 and like Mike and my team as well happening before like Mike and my team will be moving from California it's like also like the scenario that's zero on the so like the play on three and right now so specifically for like a guy to like right now then plans straight away but like the very first interaction was like a racer like Erika straight away like destroying like the prejudice as a joke of like Eddie towards like Erika's like the scenario that I'm the right like and like that way like Eddie going from like basically wanting Erika as like a part of like the just like a part club to without material like him going from that to that basically him wanting him seeing like Erika as like the future leader of like the part club of him once like Eddie will be retiring or like once Eddie will be like finally graduating and leaving like public school like basically will be passing on the that single only person who will be like lead like the part club after like Eddie. Like that Eddie would be definitely that only person that's like worthy of like pass or like Eddie to like pass on the tops of like that leadership role of like the fan club as like Erika alone with like scenarios that I'm referring to. Like without this creating I'm totally preferring for like Erika to be like the favorite member of like the fan club of like Eddie with like the scenario that I'm referring about the game so right now. Yes, so like that's my impression right now. As for like another opportunity that I'm looking for like maybe right now as like the basketball match, like championship match that going on like in media right now for like Chrissy to like most likely have like next even more of like a scary hallucination happening to her and basically of like the minimal like happening to her and basically at that point, I'm just for accuracy for me forgetting about like the situation and everything. Like the only thing that if you getting so scared and like at that point, like the only thing that the thing would be like seeing would be like boyfriend like the basketball leader like would be like the only person that like at that point would be no thing. So especially while getting scared by all like hallucination like everything like the sea so they're running towards like her boyfriend and basically uh, like hugging on to her boyfriend. That's absolute fear like her like holding on to her boyfriend while in like the middle of like the championship match while like her boyfriend like the basketball leader the one thing most likely at that exactly at that point like being like situation where like he might be about to like for a point and basically and I'm looking that maybe that's happening as next the match time would be as well might be almost over and by like in the case of like the team of like the leader basketball leader if the team being in a critical situation and basically like the free hold for them like depending on that final point. So like I'm saying exactly at that point I'm looking at maybe see having the like scary hallucination and we are running into like the playfield of like the basketball and basically running towards that person and like hugging him and like at that point I'm looking like the basketball leader quite conducting getting extremely uh, uh, furious and irritated and unstable and maybe that pushing see away and let us see what is falling down like in front of like the entire team of like the crowd, like the school of all of Hawkins, including with like Nancy right now being present among like the crowd, like near the Nancy seeing all this like Nancy like straight away telling them seeing all this and like definitely whispering that Nancy scored like taking pictures of maybe Nancy as well like taking pictures and just like running in to like help the was like the scenario that I'm whispering. Definitely I'm whispering that way like Nancy like I think so, like holding on to like Chrissy from that point on and like Chrissy's like financial behavior from that point on like the scenario that I'm whispering and definitely I'm whispering like Nancy from that point on, I'm looking kind of left brain solely due to that act of like see like running into like the playfield and against our boys and like I'm looking like once like that the team would be moved back to like the sideline second and like the match would be restarting resuming from that point on. I'm looking like definitely uh, the team of like the basketball league like handled it like totally losing against like the other cases like the scenario that I'm looking over and that from that point on, like I'm looking like the basketball leader, like him, then he's being extremely furious with the accuracy, and him most likely maybe even breaking up with accuracy. It's like about the that I'm basketball wrestling, and to see being like extremely sad, and like sad and like I'm looking at those times when I was looking like and Nancy would be sharply like trying to like with like Ruthie and trying to like find out like what went wrong with like what happened to like Ruthie which has caused us to like run into that uh, basketball players made match and everything like but like I'm thinking like you both are being in that exchange is that like say like say not at all cooperating like Nancy at all and not saying anything like Nancy at all. For Nancy like for like Nancy to like leave like the scenario that I'm doing. That way like I'm still Nancy no definitely not giving up and like Nancy is very to that to fight one like Prithvi from that point on so like the scenario that I'm going to brand up during the way Prithvi probably trying that and then like the way Prithvi would be in an extremely scared while being a side of thing would be scared and screaming while running into like the basketball playfield and like going up towards like her boyfriend like the way Prithvi would be scared and screaming at that point would be definitely uh, giving that friendly upside of like quite to like an piece definitely for the industry. Then I definitely not them so right now it's definitely for like two simultaneous decades like the decade of like the basketball in the in like the current championship match is like the winning scenario that and simultaneously while like the team of like the and like the basketball leader like team leaders like a team would be facing that ticket like exactly same day at the same time like when totally did like Tarika was like coming up with some sort of like a unique and brilliant strategy like I'm bring like the Tarika and crew like defeating Eddie as well like the person up that I'm looking for like that way like these two simultaneous defeats like happening unexpected defeats like happening on that very night with like scenarios that I'm involved in it's like definitely on the rendition right now, definitely got like the leader of like the basketball team who might have definitely want to like definitely want to be like the person who's been more than spotlight with like the person to like deliver that like final spot of like the games. Which just talk about games definitely on the rendition. So definitely with like Lucas getting that final spotlight like definitely I'm referring like the basketball team leader like him definitely not probably please like Lucas and definitely from this point on him specifically targeting on Lucas and definitely ensuring that like Lucas that the person like not able to like play like the very next like basketball game like the scenario that I was in like definitely I'm doing like the team leader of like the basketball team in the selected discipline that would be a person will be totally feeling that absolute fear of like the box like and Lucas like eventually if this Lucas keeps this okay Lucas keeps like the performance current performance of like sort of step like Lucas eventually surpassing like the leader of like the basketball team so and becoming like the new leader. Like so, certainly that being like the last thing that he would be only wanting. So like definitely from this point on being it fully jealous of like the and definitely before like the very next like passport case that would be happening in the first like it was just for best to like ensure to like get like because remain in like sub and not be part of that the main thing. But like I'm definitely that the coach definitely don't remember would be definitely would be taking to his position, which would be definitely to have that Lucas play not as a sub but like a main post in like the basketball team. And definitely I'm just bring that operating in that the jealousy of that team there of that the basketball team eventually it's adding to lack of the cause like an injury to lack the realistically himself to say that it's adding to lack of to get look up to like some sort of like an action not to get look up have some sort of like an injury or to have like or by using some additives like to have like use like look up like properly and to somehow that way make it not possible for like look up to like play like the very next possible games like one definitely like signature like mirror with the possibility will be I can think like the next time is the league message and I'm able to point out with like look the situation being like solely due to like look up like final shot like solely due to that alone like the team winning like the I'm definitely something that because from the popularity I'm considering I like how it's called like skyrocketing from this point on. And definitely I'm considering and I'm only putting that a whole lot of girls from that how it's called like wanting to that the really wanting to like date Lucas and everything that girls chasing after like Lucas like the scenario that I'm considering and definitely I'm considering like or that getting to like the scenario that I'm or that getting to like Lucas head that like I'm considering from that point on like Lucas temporarily forgetting about like the about his like past, about his like friendship with like Mike and Trevor and like about his like bond with Mike and everything and like Lucas slowly seeing them like interacting with them and spending time with them as like they were starting to feel that as like an embarrassment while always being surrounded by the crowd of like uh, the crowd of like the most folk girls as well as like people from like public school, classmates from like friends from like public school, like looking at that and that way like temporarily I'm preferring for like because to like have all that get to steps until eventually I'm preferring that all that would be totally that on look up eventually like the next basketball game that will be happening after the current basketball game. In which like I'm preferring most likely solely due to like the secret villains of like the team leader of like the basketball team that I'm preferring that look up not being able to like play that match and that is not like resulting in like the that team leader of like the basketball team like getting back to like now spotlight and so reflecting the scenario that I'm doing and everyone's like forgetting once again like forgetting like the scenario that I'm looking and like that way looking for popular was like the scenario that I'm supporting and that way eventually I'm putting like Lucas at that point like maybe feeling bad and remembering that. And I'm whispering maybe that way for like the post being that Lucas has like underlabeled or like Lucas not showing up for like that next basketball match. Or like maybe due to like some injury that can be realistically caused by like that leader of like the basketball team that Lucas not being able to like play for and like the upcoming basketball matches for a while. And basically that way look at losing his like suddenly losing all of that popularity and everything. And definitely that way eventually I'm looking like the like running back to his like friendship gang of like Mike and all of them. And definitely I'm looking like at that point definitely initially I'm looking like Mike and all like not straight away accepting Lucas like the scenario that I'm looking at. Maybe saying something tough to like Lucas for like different against something like the scenario that I'm and like Lucas being a skin this and like definitely Lucas on that day like as like on that night like most likely as like Lucas will be on that way back um or like on that evening like as like Lucas will be on that way back from school back home all by himself like before like making it home that Lucas getting completely captured by one of like one of like the students from like public school. By then like I'm looking like the element of the minimum are like most likely controlling around like receive multiple of like students of like public school and this is one of like the students that got into like the plans of like the minimum mind plan like actually affecting those like scenarios and everything. So like at that point I'm looking like the coming days like I'm putting like Mike and the others like the very next day onward like I'm putting like Mike and the like feeling bad about like rejecting the and this is them deciding to like after Lucas back. and say they're sorry for like being harshly like with but like I'm for instance then like I'm wrong then faced with that new reality of like basically no suddenly missing like the scenario that I was developing. So like with that guilt like I'm sorry Mike and also like putting in their effort and basically like the entire investigation to like definitely find and save the person like within the scenario that I was developing and also and maybe I'm discovering by the time Mike and would be finding Lucas like I'm like because like the main mind the mind player must like it hasn't taken control of the all of like and definitely I'm discovering Mike and was facing such an extreme situation yet like I'm sorry mentally definitely things totally working out for like Mike and all of us and definitely then able to unlike in like Lucas case like in Lucas case like them fully being like say Lucas from and free Lucas from like the control of like the element of the mind player eventually in time it's like in the possible scenario the possible scenario that I'm trying and trying. Okay, so like the treatment is very important right now for like disease like hallucination that comes to like the element of the mind player like getting worse from like Eddie like so that scenario that different for like if you're running off from like Eddie's house. And definitely that comes to getting matching definitely don't feel like and usually like even Eddie home by the time Eddie if they're running back like I'm different that if they would only miss it that is like what is like now that I'm saying. Same with like going off to like the forest nearby and definitely I'm whispering like from that one on like will be being that being like staying within that force. It's like the finance that I was and like during that investigation that they was like matching will be straight away suspecting that on finding out about like if we going missing like bring Michael straight away like suspecting that Eddie and like definitely like justifying against like Eddie to like the police officer such as like listener that in that way Eddie getting into like serious trouble. It's that really good scenario that I'm Eddie must like getting out of the and getting into like serious trouble that way like single scenario that I'm from the friend of friend and the player looking like none of them like definitely neither Mike nor stuff that definitely trust in lack of maybe my feeling a little bit of suspicion of that whether like Eddie is actually the culprit of behind like the mission of portrayal, but like the Dustin definitely would be absolutely fine out without definitely be aware of like the kind of character that it is. So definitely that's the strongly that even that definitely it is not like the concept so that they are not like that way. Dustin and Mike deciding to like find out the truth and to like find the secrets that the scenario that I'm going and definitely that they will be finding out about like Maxine, the testimony and like Maxine and now seeing that like you see like stepping into like a discount and then going the big and release like the so the player would bring that Dustin and Mike like talking to like Martin and Martin would just still sticking by Dustin that like definitely the culprit but like the player would bring like Dustin and Mike through that interaction between like Dustin and Mike and Martin like the player would Martin as well starting to feel a bit suspicious if like the possibility of like maybe she might have wrongly judged that getting and like that way Martin maybe feeling starting to feel a bit of guilt with like consequently the possibility of what if like Martin is a bit around about like judgment of that area. Basically, that way, like the team of like Mike doesn't and Mapping like like deciding to like look for like do their own investigation and trying to like find the missing people like in this scenario that I'm looking for the training. Also, the thing I'm mentioned right now is definitely that the element of the commitment class might be probably separate and might be even though in a slow pace, like not completely to that right at present like only gate often from like the bad world to like the real world and like only being at like the original build of making Prakya might be like the case so like due to that long distance like the spreading of like the monster element of like the minimize the within and that perceive might be at like such an extremely slow pace unlike in that season 3 the minimum train version so definitely it might be due to the reason that like that perceive like during her hallucination like often hearing repeatedly hearing like the sound of like clock taking as well as like even seeing like clock and everything like the connection to like sign and recently produced like hallucination might be definitely connected to like the pace of like the spreading of like affect the monster and might within literacy might be like a case depending on the damage with like so definitely was eventually that in one of like perceived like hallucination the clock then that the clock then bringing to like the scenario that I'm getting and at that point is when I was bring like the spreading of the monster element within to see would be complete to like the point of like perceived losing control and basically that element of the community might like taking full control over the happening and while it will be happening like I'm looking like exactly for like in one of like the future conditions to see like the clock bell ringing is like the good scenario that I'm going to bring. And that definitely one of the remission right now is that like exactly like in like police case where a bunch of my brain the terms of different like really might so they have like the trauma connected to that the law of the like actual mother home that or like the point of that losing the like mother like they might have witnesses, but might have not been in a situation where like they might have not been able to like do anything to like save. No, that might have been like the case of the funeral again. And on the might have been a similar case of like a similar trauma might be so the might be present within like Chrissy as well. And it might be totally connected to that, which is like younger brother where like the same as well might have in like the past might have gone through a situation where like he might have lost that brother and might have been a situation where like he might have witnessed this and might have not been able to like save that brother. Might have been like the case. This definitely might have been the real. It's like definitely much more important right now, definitely for the number of power things that happening and like Eddie. So exactly with that Eddie right now standing in front of right in front of like beyond the become right now then for that power outage happening solely at like Eddie's phone channel. And I'm whispering that maybe at that point would be calling out for like the sea. But like I'm whispering that once like the power center coming back like at that point like Eddie shows me finding that it's it only limited at this point, like with an artist that I would do. Like Teddy would be quickly looking around for like calling out job like a thing. And Teddy will be totally considering Eddie only stepping out of his laptop and looking around as well in like surrounding area and like Teddy's home. And there as well like Chrissy was totally missing. And they won't be seeing like Chrissy at all like not even a trace of Chrissy at all like that I'm sort of like so that that way like I'm different like the missing of like Chrissy happening is like the scenario and definitely have to bring the Eddie like saying this like word by word to that the police officer and definitely something like because of like, the situation itself in which that Eddie was but like pretty before like that upon the member from intimacy the missing of like okay will be happening that was bring definitely none of like the police officer like Eddie at all uh, it's like then scenario, even though Eddie will be repeatedly like, telling that this is what exactly happened, that and the clinic, none of that circumstances, and that believing uh, Eddie and basically Eddie getting straight away arrested, just like the scenario that episode of the Brighton and Friends. I guess so like these might be very interesting right now, especially for like the plans of like the Minimind Club, which was destroyed towards like the end of the season 3. Or Stranger Things might have definitely not just been like the plan of like the Minimind Club alone, but like it might have been like the plan of like the original mind flare like giving like the order to like the mini mind flare and see like exactly what to do next if they have communication. Remote communication might be like the case definitely not because due to that's the case being like that open like state in like the energy laboratory beneath like the morning of that history like I'm saying there might have been that like remote communication maybe happening between like the original giant mind flare as well as like the mini mind flare. Right, back in like season 3 of like since might have been like the case that we were so like definitely after that plan towards like the end of season 3 was like destroyed. Uh, that at that point and like the airport closed like at that point I'm just like maybe just by as part of the like after that like the next strategy that the giant of the mind flap might have thought of might have been to that merge that the faceless humanoid monster with like the mind giant of the mind flap like power and that way like so that merging like empathy like like humanoid monster with like the face might have been born is definitely another thing. So like maybe in like the parabola person maybe such an entire army of like humanoid monsters with like the face uh, might be created through like the giant original mind flap like merging with like the humanoid faces monsters might be like that to get about what to do. The new situation like the giant of the mind flap has like the spider like form that this might be like the reason for like basically the connection between like probably repeatedly having hallucinations and seeing like all these like spiders uh might be all connected to like this might be like a like about that I'm bringing up again.